Greetings, welcome back to the Maya Workshop, where we are still workshopping Maya. We're about to get started on our project, and there is a file that I want people to be able to have access to, which I have put up in a public Dropbox location. And I realize you can't copy and paste from your screen when you're looking at a video like this, but I thought I'd just kind of leave this sitting on the video. If you're watching the video, please pause it if you need to. And I would like it if somebody over in BuzzNet would confirm that they were able to grab this picture, this image. It's just a texture. There's nothing really all that fancy about it. It's just a little 1024 by 1024 wood texture. So if somebody would grab that and let me know whether or not it was grabbable, or if I need to do something fancy in Dropbox to make it grabbable. But it should be. It's in my public folder, and then this is the public link to it. So I'll just kind of chill here for just a moment and wait for somebody, some sweet person, to confirm that. And Sajiro is the first. He says that it works, which is good. So please, I'm about to have to move away from this. If you haven't yet written down this address, please take a screen. Oh, there you go. There's NATO being super nice to me. So NATO's put that up inside of BuzzNet, and of course if you're just watching the video you can pause and pull that back at any time. Okay, so you'll need that at some point. Just be aware of that and know that you can get it from somewhere. What I'm going to do is go to File and do a new scene. And I'll go ahead and show my grid so everything looks kind of like it does by default. And I know we finished talking about the UI, but there really is one more part to the UI that I want to bring up that I think is important. And that is the use of the hotbox to make you a better Maya user. And here's what I mean. Watch this. I'm going to go under Display, UI Elements, and go to Hide All UI Elements. Freaky, huh? And then, to top things off for my next trick, we can go to Window, Settings Preferences, and go to Preferences, and under the interface I can turn off the menu bar, I can turn off the panel bar, I can turn off the panel toolbar, I can turn off the title bar, and in the script editor, and hit save. And now Maya is really just one gigantic window. That's all it is, and you can still use it like this. The reason you can use it like this is because you have the hotbox, which gives you access to all of your menus. So for instance, if I want to start off by creating the basis of our set for our project, I can do that by going under Create, Polygon Primitives, and make a plane. And it says drag on the grid. I'm just going to drag out a great big plane, like so, and hit 5. And there you have it. We could slide this around and kind of center it up on the grid if we so desired. Now, I'm not saying you have to work this way, but I want to tell you that you can, and it's really not a bad way to work to kind of help you learn where things are hidden in Maya. But I'll go ahead, just because this is a new class, and we'll go ahead and show all the UI elements once again. I'll go back into, let me turn off the tool settings, that's in my way. Let's go back into the Preferences window, so Window, Settings, Preferences, and Preferences. And we'll turn on the menu bar, we'll turn on the panels menu bar, turn on the panels toolbar, and turn on the title bar, and hit save. And now we're right where we left off. So, just kind of a neat feature. So I have created a plane, and I'm going to rename this to Floor. To rename it, I'm going to select the object, and over in the channel box, just click on its name, and we'll set this to Floor, like so. Now, I just want to see who's back and who's following along with me, so if you would, please update your status to let me know that you've created a new scene and you now have a floor. And let's see, Chef's J Jeep 71, if you would, please use your status buttons at the top of BuzzNet. You should see Ready, 1 minute, and Not Ready. If you're finished, just go ahead and click on Ready. And it looks like you've switched off Participate, so make sure you click Participate if you want to participate and follow along. There you go. And you're ready. So that's perfect. Paul, are you still following along at all? Or are you still here? Just let me know when you can. And that'll just tell me whether or not I should be paying attention to your status updates. Now, before we get much further, we really ought to create a new project. In fact, to be perfectly honest, we probably should have created a project first. I just wanted to show you guys how to create something using the hotbox, so I got a little bit ahead of myself. But let's go to File and open up the project window. And inside of this, I want you to click the New button on the far right-hand side. And we're going to name this, I don't care what you name it, but I'm going to name mine Maya Workshop Project. And that's all I need to do. Just type in that name. Now notice where it's going. It's going under C, Users, My Name, Documents, Maya, and Projects. It's where all my projects go by default, and I generally leave them there unless I know that I need to put them someplace else. So go ahead and click Accept. Then as soon as I've done that, my next step is to save my scene. So go to File, Save Scene, and notice where it's putting things now. It's putting it in C, Users, there's my name, Documents, Maya, Projects, Maya Workshop Project, there's the project we just created, and it's going in the Scenes folder. So it's keeping things nicely organized for you with very minimal effort on your part. And we'll call this Workshop_1. Press Enter. So go ahead and just, I'm going to kind of keep things a little granulated, at least to get things started. So let me know via your ready status when you've got a new project and you've got your file saved. And if you have questions or you get stuck or anything like that along the way, please just make sure you drop a question over into the question panel. Okay, so we've got the basis of our scene, or it's just going to be a little floor, and now we need to create our first character. Now, I don't want to let anybody down, but this character is going to be pretty simple. And here's how we're going to make it. Let's start off by going to Create. We'll go to Polygon Primitives and just make a cube. Now, as always, you get the drag on the base of the grid and then pull up for height. And what we're going to do is something a little bit fancy. I want you to hold down the X button. The X button is for grid snapping. And put your mouse right over the center of the scene. And as you click and drag, you're now dragging out from directly at the center, which because it's at the same height as the floor, it does look a little bit funny. Now, while you're dragging, hold down the Shift key and watch what happens. You're now creating a perfect cube starting right from the origin. Now I'm going to make a cube that is a total of 4 units to a side, and if you take a look at the base grid, you can confirm that. 2 units in each direction of the axis. If yours is a little different, that's fine. It's not a big problem. I just want you to make sure you're holding down the Shift key and creating a perfect cube. And if you would, please update your ready status to let me know that you now have your cube. Alright, killer. Now, notice the translates for our cube are pretty particular. We have 0, 2, and 0. I'm going to just kind of keep that in mind, that 2 units is going to pick my cube right onto the surface of the floor. And I'm going to lift the cube up into the air for a minute. The reason I'm doing that is so that I can get to all the sides of it. This is just one of those things that I do. If you don't like moving your stuff, if you want to stay, keep everything nice and precise, you have another option. You could turn on Isolate Select. It's with this little button in the viewport toolbar. It looks like a little green dashed box with a red arrow on it. If you click that, then what it does is it hides out everything that is not selected right now, meaning all we see is the cube. And I don't really care if you move the cube up into the air or you turn on Isolate Select. Pick one or the other. Now we're going to do a little bit of modeling. And this is where stuff starts to get kind of fun, but still pretty basic. I want you to hold down the right mouse button, and you get another one of these marking menus. This will allow us to choose the different types of components that we have access to on this object. And the one we're most interested in right now is the face, or faces of this object. So go ahead and just hold down the right mouse button and choose Face. And you'll notice, as you mouse over the different faces, you'll get a little highlighted area to let you know which face you currently are about to select. What I want you to do is select all of them. Hold down Shift and just click on each one so you have all 6 sides selected. If you see the vertices of your cube turning yellow like this, tap the B key and make that go away. We don't need that right now. Now, once you have all those faces selected, our next goal is to make an extrusion. There's a few different ways to do this. We can press F3 and go into the Polygons menu set. We can go under Edit Mesh and choose Extrude. But to me, that's kind of the long way, and I never do it. All of your polygon modeling tools are actually tucked away if you hold down the Shift key and the right mouse button on your object. This is one of my favorite modeling shortcuts. Everything that you really need is buried right here. So if you look straight down, there's Extrude Face. So we'll go ahead and hit that. Now I want to show you how this works. Something very interesting has happened. We're not just performing an operation on the surface like we would be if we were using Blender or even 3ds Max. What has happened is that a Poly Extrude Face node has been created. And this node is storing what was selected at the time the node was generated, and then it can apply all of these different properties to actually form the extrusion. Now, if that sounds a little bit complicated or over the top, you don't have to stress about it too much right now, other than to understand the fact that every operation you perform on an object is going to create a node on that object. And I can prove it to you. And I will here in just a moment. First off, here's what I want to do. If you rotate around your object, you'll see that on one side, and it'll be a little bit different on your side, you have the blue arrow of your manipulator pointing out the side of your face. Click and drag that blue arrow. What happens is your entire box seems to get bigger, and that's because right now you're doing an extrusion which is keeping all of your faces attached. So what I want you to do is look over in the channel box. If you don't see the channel box for some reason, make sure the channel box tab is selected, or if you don't even see the tab, take a note of these buttons up here in the upper right-hand corner of the interface. And all you really need to do is make sure you click on channel box, and that'll expose it. If you scroll down, you should see Keep Faces Together, which is probably set to on your installation of Maya. Go ahead and just switch that to off, or 0. You can type in the word off if you want to. I generally hit 0 because it's faster. And now, take a look at our extrusion. It's doing something entirely different. It's pulling each one of those 6 faces out individually in their own direction. Now here's the gag. We really didn't want to move that out at all. So if you scroll back up on those properties, you'll see Local Translate Z, which is the property that is updating as you drag that blue arrow. What I'd like you to do is set that back to 0. What I want to do instead is create kind of an inset. To do that, we're going to scale down each one of these faces. Now, I'm getting a couple of questions that have come in, and I'm sorry if I missed that. My faces are not highlighting green when mousing over. Well, could be a couple of things that could cause that to happen. Hang on just a second. Let me finish this one operation. What I want you to do is click on any one of these little cubes floating at the end of the manipulator. Just click, don't drag. And what that does is that changes the center of the manipulator into a scale cube. And I want you to scale this down slightly and create an inset. If you wanted to do it numerically, you can come down to Local Scale XYZ, and you can set that to anywhere maybe around 0.7 to make your inset. Now, Johan, I'm going to step away for just a minute and focus specifically on you. It says your faces are not highlighting green when mousing over. Well, let me get away from this object for just a minute, and I'm going to create a brand new cube, just to kind of go back over the process. So you created a polygon cube, yes? And you can respond to our talking over inside of BuzzNet if you like. It'll allow us to interact a little more closely. Okay. Also tells me who you are, which is great. Okay, and then you right mouse on this new object and shows faces, yeah? When you right mouse, do you see faces or do you see something else entirely? You see nothing. When you right mouse, you see nothing? Or after you've selected faces, you see nothing? Yes, it's right mouse and hold. Because it's possible, I'm not saying this is exactly what happened, but it's possible that you were creating a NURBS cube, which looks a lot like it, but you get an entirely different selection of stuff, and you don't even see faces. You don't want to do that. A NURBS cube isn't going to help us at all. No NURBS. Okay. NURBS aren't that bad, Chris. We're just not going to use them right now. Okay, well, let's see. Another way, if you don't want to have to hold down the right mouse button, you can press F11, and that will allow you to select faces. And what they should be doing is highlighting red when you mouse over, but even if they're not for some reason, which could be maybe you've played with some settings at some point, it could be a video card issue, there's all kinds of reasons why that might not be highlighting, can you still click on these faces and select them? Okay, as long as you can select the faces, that's fine, and I won't worry about the fact that they are or are not highlighting. No worries at all, okay? As long as you can still select them and get all 6 of them, then you have everything you need to be able to hold down Shift and right mouse and do an extrusion operation, where once again, all we did is we took the Keep Faces Together option and switched that off. Okay. So do you already have your inset done? So take local translate, set it to 0, and then take your local scale and set it to, what do we set it? Negative 0.7, I think? Oh no, what did we set that to? Good lord. We set it to, if I go under my poly extrude face, just 0.7, so it wasn't negative anything. Alright, good. So you've got all of that. Okay, so now let's go back into our faces, and we're just going to select those inset faces, if you don't have them selected already. You might. And then we're going to extrude again, and you can repeat your last command, if your last thing you did was an extrusion, by hitting the G key. And I want you to just push this straight back just a little bit. Now in my case, I'm going back about negative 0.22 units. But this is not an exact science, so if yours is a little different, that's perfectly all right. Okay, now once you've got that, hold down the right mouse button again, and we're going to switch over to Edges. And what I'd like you to do is to select all of the edges around the object. Now, real quick, I'm going to take my floor. I don't really like working in isolate select mode, so I'm just going to take my floor and, well, I could hide it. Let's just do that. I'm going to hit Control H and hide the floor. So H for hide, Control H. We can always make it visible again later on. And I'll switch back over to edges, and I want all of the outer edges, so all the corners of this box. Should be 12 of them, I believe. Can you repeat the last extrusion? Sure thing. It looks like I need to anyway. Let me just back up a few times. I'll just undo. So simply make sure that you have all 6 of those inset faces selected. Then shift right mouse, go to extrude, and all we're really doing is just pushing that in a little bit. The amount is kind of arbitrary, but I've got it to around 0.2 units, so that's in the negative direction. I'll just press F8, and I'm going to go ahead and hide my floor again. So this is the shape that you end up with. Okay, so once you've got that, switch back over to edges, and I want you to select all of the edges on the outside of the box. do a quick rotation around, make sure you have them all. And once you know that you do, shift right mouse again, and you'll see bevel edge. Now that's a pretty thick bevel for what I have in mind here. So I'm going to make some changes. You'll notice over in the channel box we have the poly bevel node. We're going to make a few changes to this. If you select any one of these attributes, and here's just a nice little feature of Maya, you can select any one of them and then drag in the viewport with your middle mouse button, and that's called the virtual slider. And that'll update that value for you. So I'm going to pull the offset down to about 0.2, and I'll increase the segments. I'll go with 3 times. That's a little overboard. I could probably get away with 2, but we'll go ahead and do 3 anyway. And yeah, this is a pretty easy way to make a companion cube, if that's what you're going for. Now, I want to reset everybody's ready status, and I want you to let me know when you've made it to this point, please. Good luck, Scott. Please drive very carefully. It's fine, Raven. I think you were here for the last class, so I think all you missed was just what we've already kind of covered. Yeah, I can do the last bevel. As a matter of fact, Raven, if you just got here, watch this carefully, okay? I'm going to catch you up because I like you and because I'm feeling very generous right now. And I've still got a couple of people who are working, so I'm going to take advantage real fast. Here's what we did. We created a polygon cube. We did this by holding down X and the Shift key, so that snaps it to the grid and makes a perfect cube. Pretty easy, actually. Once we had that, we selected all 6 of the faces on it. And then did an extrusion. Hold down Shift and right mouse, and these are all of your polygon modeling tools. Definitely keep that trick in mind. All of your polygon modeling tools hide under Shift right mouse. Choose Extrude Face. The first thing you want to do is take a look at the properties for this extrusion, and you'll see over in the channel box, keep faces together. Turn that off so that you have individual faces moving in their own different directions. Because if you leave that on, all the faces stay attached, and that doesn't work out very well for us. So turn Keep Faces Together off. Local Translate Z, we're actually going to leave at 0, and all I really want to do is scale down all of these faces. This just creates a little bit of an inset, and we did that to about 0.7. So you can just take Local Scale XYZ and set that to about 0.7. Once you've got that, press G to do another extrusion, and just push these new faces inward by about 2 to 2.5 units. With those 2 extrusions done, you're going to switch over to edges. So hold down the right mouse button, move up slightly with the mouse to select edges, and you'll need to select all of the corner edges. There are 12 of these on a cube. And once you're sure you have them all, Shift and right mouse again, and go over to Bevel Edge. Now that's created your bevel, and you should see the properties for that bevel over in the channel box. Now, one of the cool features of Maya is the virtual slider. If you click on the name of any one of these attributes, you can middle mouse drag to control them with slider-like control. So we're going to set the offset to about, on this one, about 0.3. I think it was 0.3 on the other one, but it might have been 0.2. Either way is fine. We'll select our segments and increase the segments up to 3. And there you go. You're caught up if you've made it to that point. And that also should take care of Richard, who needed to see the bevel again. And if you need to see the bevel one more time, we need to do one more. So what we'll do is jump back over to edges on our cube. And I want to grab the outer frame of all of these inset faces, not the inner frame. I don't really care about the inner frame. So it should be 24 edges, I believe. It's easy to miss one or select the wrong one too, so definitely pay close attention to what you have selected. And there you go. Once you have all those, we're going to do another bevel. So shift right mouse, choose bevel edge. Same thing as before. You can play with the offset. I'm going to leave the offset pretty tight here. Now this time 0.3 looks quite a bit smaller because the edges themselves are smaller, which is fine. And I'll give it just, excuse me, just one extra segment. Should really be all that it needs. When you're done, press F8. And there you go. Okay, so I'd like to get everybody who is following along to update their ready status to let me know you've made it to this point. This thickness offset options in the viewport with extrusion are from Maya 2012, if I'm not mistaken. It's actually, I think that goes all the way back to every version of Maya I've ever used. Oh, if there was a random audio change, I did a quick mute on my end because I had to cough. Pay no attention. And what you're hearing is probably the sound of my fans kicking out because it's very stuffy up here and I've got to have some fans or I won't be able to breathe by the end of this class. Okay, so please remember to update your ready status if you're following along. Raven, if you're following along, if you would, please click participate over in BuzzNet and keep your ready status updated. If you're working and trying to do something, it should be set to 1 minute. If you're done, it should be set to ready. Really, I don't want to see anybody set to not ready if they're working. I reset everybody to not ready just as a way to see who's actually following along and who isn't. Okay, you're just spectating. That's totally cool. All right. So, now, I want to put a material on this guy. That'll be my next thing. Also, Raven, you probably didn't realize this, but there is a floor here. If I go under Window and go into the hypergraph for the hierarchy, you'll see there's a floor node here that's grayed out. That means I've hidden it. I hit Control-H to hide it. We should be able to hit Control-Shift-H to show it as long as we select it first. So you can click on the node and hit Control-Shift-H to unhide it at any given point. But for now, I'm just going to leave it hidden. Okay. What we're going to do next is turn this into a nursery-style letter block. And to do that, we're going to need some letters, or numbers, or symbols, or whatever it is you want to put on here. But here's how we're going to create them. I want you to go to Create, and down to Text, and open up the Options box. That's what this is called over on the right-hand side of a lot of these different commands. It's called the Options box. You'll click on that, and that'll open up the Options window, and type out any collection of 6 letters or numbers, whatever you want. I've just got A, B, C, D, E, and F, but you can choose whichever ones you want. Now, there are some settings here that are going to be important to you, but we're going to leave this very, very simple. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go to Reset Settings and put it back to defaults. So watch this. I'll do A, B, C, D, E, F, all in lowercase this time, just for the fun of it. Set the type over to bevel, and don't touch anything else. Leave the rest of the settings just as they are. Then click Create. And you get this. Now, let's take just a minute and talk about manipulating objects in 3D. We haven't really had much of an opportunity to do that. But we have the ability, of course, to move objects. And you've seen the Move tool underneath the W key. You can drag any one of these axes and move it around. You can grab the little square in the middle, and you can move things around in screen space. You can also hold down the Control key and click on any one of those axes and that will nullify that axis in terms of the tool. So now if I click and drag on that little yellow square, I'm now only moving in 2 axes. So that's by control clicking on an axis. During one of those extrudes, I had an extra edge selected. Is there a way to go back to that node and unselect that one edge? No. The selections are fed into that node in a permanent manner. You would need to go back and undo. What history is going to allow you to do is to go back and change settings that were applied to that selection. So what you'd want to do is just tap the Z key a few times to get back to where you were. Now on that note, I will mention this as kind of a tip. If you go under your preferences, which is again, it's under this little tiny icon of the little red running dude who looks like he was on an Intellivision from way back in the day. And if you know what an Intellivision is, pat yourself on the back for being awesome. Under preferences, way down toward the bottom, you'll see undo. Leave undo on, don't ever turn that off. And you'll notice the queue size is set to 50. That's still quite a bit, but I've burned through 50 without even trying. So you can set this to infinity, and basically that'll just take as many of it as it can before it starts to run out of memory. And since I'm running a 64-bit OS with 16 gigs of RAM, that's a heck of a lot of undoing. Now, it's not just going to crash your computer if you run out of undos. It will start overwriting stuff, and it will run out of undos eventually, but you'll still have a heck of a lot of them. So I would just leave that set to infinity at all times. Okay, now for the Move tool, a couple other things I want to point out. You've already seen that you can get to the Move tool by tapping the W key, but if you hold down the W key and the left mouse button, you get some options for it. So you can reflect your motions across an axis. You can choose to move in object or world space. Is there anybody in the room who doesn't know the difference between object and world space? Let me know over inside of BuzzNet. I'm just curious. I'm not getting many responses. That's actually kind of cool. Oh, I know. So nobody's actually saying they don't know, but here's the difference anyway. If I take this object and I rotate it slightly, in world space, you'll notice the Move tool is oriented along with the world axes, which you can see in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. If I switch over to object space, the Move tool updates to correspond with the local rotation of that object. That's really all there is to it. So go ahead and undo. Now, that takes us to rotation. Let's see, a quick thing. Note to self, when working in isolated mode on the cube, you won't see the text when you create it. That's true. That's one of the reasons I don't like working in isolated mode. Now, there is a trick to that. All you did was clicked on isolate select. You clicked on the button. You can right-click on this button and get some options, and you can choose add selected object. Auto load new objects, and then anything new that you create will jump into the view as you create it, and that can really save you from getting confused. Just so you know that that's there. Johan just said, looks like I turbo smoothed my cube. How do I undo this? That's pretty cool, isn't it, when you do this? It does look pretty fancy. I'll give you some credit, but really what you probably did is you hit the 3 key. That would be my guess. That's your subdivision display smoothness. You can set that to 1, 2, or 3. The difference, it's not really as much as a level of smoothness as it is what it is you want to look at. If you tap the 1 key, you're just looking at the base mesh. If you tap the 2 key, you're looking at the smooth result and the base mesh in wireframe. And then if you hit 3, you're just looking at the smooth result. So just hit 1 and it'll set it right back. The neat thing about doing that is that you can tap the 3 key and Mental Ray will actually respect that and show you the smooth result, which is pretty cool. And I use that to my advantage a lot. Okay, so let's switch over quickly to the Rotate tool. So that's the E key. This gives you 3 concentric rings all pointing off in orthogonal directions along with the corresponding axes. And you can rotate along all 3 of those axes. So there's X. There's Y, and there's Z. The ring that floats around the outside allows you to rotate in screen space. Now, I do want to point this out. Maya, by default, is using the Euler algorithm for rotation, meaning you can run into gimbal lock. What do I mean when I say gimbal lock? If I rotate forward in X and then try to rotate in Y, take a look at my rotation numbers over in the channel box. All 3 of them are rotating. That's because in Euler axes, when you're using the Euler algorithm for rotation, all three of your axes are parented to one another. And so Maya actually has to do a lot of work under the hood to give you the rotation you're asking for. It's got to rotate all three axes to make that happen. For the time being, we are not particularly worried about this, but I will give you a tip. Later on in your career, as you get into animating more complicated rotations than we'll be handling today, you will have to understand how that works and how to swap up the parenting hierarchy of your rotations to keep that from being a problem and to avoid what is called gimbal lock. I can show you really quickly what gimbal lock is. If you hold down the E key and left mouse, you also get some options, just like we had with the move tool. And we can choose local or world or gimbal. Gimbal actually shows you what's going on under the hood of your rotations. And the way it works is the x-axis is parented to the y-axis, is parented to the z-axis. So x rotates all by itself and doesn't do anything. Wherever the y-axis goes, the x-axis comes along. And wherever the z-axis goes, it brings the other two along. So there's kind of a hierarchy of fellowship there. The problem with that, if I rotate my y-axis 90 degrees or close to it, what happens if I rotate an x? The same thing as if I rotate in z. This is called gimbal lock, and it seems like I've actually lost an axis of rotation. Now, if I switch over to object mode and get out of gimbal, then everything seems to be just fine. But what's actually going on under the hood is that Maya is doing rotation in all three axes to make what I'm asking for possible. If that's over your head or if that makes your face hurt or anything like that, do not worry about it. It's a bit over the top of what we need to understand right now, but I do want to kind of point it out, because if you start trying to animate complex rotations today, do not be alarmed if they don't seem to go exactly the way you think they should, and don't be alarmed also if the curves that you see in the graph editor later on are really, really scary looking, because that's very common. Okay. So now that takes us to the scale tool, which just gives you cubes on which you can rotate, on which you can scale your various object, any one axis or on all three at the same time. I do want to mention this: if you are using is gimbal rotation system from Max. Actually, it's just it's universal. Any program, and this is any program, that happens to be using the Euler algorithm for rotation, and that's most of them actually, will experience gimbal lock in some form or fashion. It's just the nature of it. The option is to use I just had a total brain blank. Not Euler, but the other one. And I can't think of it right now because I'm apparently medicated, and it's not coming back to me right now. It'll come to me later on. Anyway, let me go back over to scale. So you can scale up uniformly if you need to. Now, something else, when using move, rotate, or scale, any one of them, if you hold down the J key, you'll get discrete. This is especially important for rotation. If you hold down J, you'll get discrete rotation. So notice over in the channel box, my rotate Z is currently moving in increments of 5. That's very, very handy. If you need to change that for some reason, you can open up your tool settings. If you take a look in the upper right-hand corner, you have the tool settings window. And if I have the rotate tool active, you'll see we have the ability to turn on discrete rotate, and there's your step size, which I've currently set mine to 5. I think it's 15 by default. And we'll go ahead and turn off the tools because we don't need that anymore. Okay, now, with all of that out of the way, we've seen some basics of moving, rotating, and scaling. Let's now take a look at actually splitting this up, because right now this is one object that has all of our letters, and that's not particularly useful. So what I'm going to do is select this one object, hold down Shift and right mouse, and we're going to perform a polygon separate. What separate does is anytime two polygon objects are not actually merged together, as long as they are separate pieces, they will be broken apart. So just by doing that, I now have an object for A, B, C, D, E, and F. Once again, that's holding down Shift and right mouse and choosing Separate. Now, the next problem. Take a look at the pivot points for all these objects. Where's the move tool? It's really, really far away, and that's kind of a pain in the butt to work with. So I'm going to select all of these guys at the same time, Go under Modify and choose Center Pivot. So now the Move tool is going to be at the center of each letter, which will make this a whole lot easier to work with. Okay, now, next thing we're going to do is just put one of these letters on each side of my object. And there's a whole lot of different ways we can do this. One way is to make use of the orthographic views. So for instance, I could take A and just put it right here, tap the spacebar, go to the side view, and slide it forward so it fits halfway through the block. And there we go, we've just positioned A. Very, very easy. Another way would be to grab our letter, and let's say we're going to put it right here on this face. So we need to rotate it 90 degrees. Let's go ahead and do that first. I'll hit the E for the rotate tool, and hold down J for discrete rotation. And then I'll just drag this around until we make it to 90 degrees. Now let's go back to the Move tool. And what I want to do is snap this directly onto this surface. And there's a couple of different ways we can do this, and they're all pretty awesome. But here's probably my favorite way. And if you just want to use like a traditional snap, you can hold down V for point snapping. Put your mouse right over maybe this vertex right here at the corner of the box, and then just middle mouse and gesture, and that snaps it right there. So if you need to know how that works, one more time. Again, it's hold down the V key, put your mouse over the vertex you want to snap to, and then just middle mouse and wiggle just a little bit, and that'll snap it right there to that. So now, I mean, you're pretty much right where you want to be. You just center that up. If it feels a little bit big, no problem. Just scale it down a little bit. So there's B, and that lined up pretty well. Now for C, let's do something fancy, shall we? I'm going to select C, and let's go under Modify, and I love this. This is just the most amazing thing in the world. Let's use the Snap Together tool. So again, that's Modify, Snap Together. So click on the back of the C, and you get this little arrow. Then click on the face you want to put it on, and press Enter. And you know why I did this? I hate it when it does this. Actually, those of you who have some 3D Buzz history to you, you might remember that very error happening way back in the days of advanced modeling when I was putting together the F-18 cockpit a long time ago. That's a bug, and it still hasn't been fixed. It has to do with the fact that all of these letters are parented together. This is great, actually, because this allows me to break away for just a minute and talk briefly about parenting. Let me show you what this means. If I go under Window and go to Hypergraph and show the hierarchy, these are all of our letters. Notice they have not been named very well, but they are all parented together. So what we're going to do is forget about all of this for just a minute. I'm going to slide my scene off to the side here, and let's just focus on parenting. I'm going to make a polygon sphere, and I'm going to name this sphere the world. Now, let's pretend that we are on the world. In fact, and you know what? Let's make an object that represents us. What primitive represents you? Somebody tell me what primitive represents you. First person to do it wins, gets the cookie, and I'll use that primitive. Come on. Somebody over in BuzzNet, help me out here. Pick a primitive. Which one is you? The cone. NATO is a cone, and he was the first one to talk. So we're going to use a cone. Now, what I want to do is put a cone right on the surface of this sphere. So I'm going to show you guys a trick. Watch this. If I have the sphere selected, I can go under Modify and choose Make Live. What this does is this turns this object into the grid for all intents and purposes. So now if I click a cone and draw it out, it's right there on the surface of the sphere. When I'm done, just simply go back to Modify and choose Make Not Live. So here's our cone, and we'll call this cone NATO. Now, the world as we know it, the planet Earth, does a lot, actually. It's in constant motion. It's spinning around really, really fast. It's hurtling through space at thousands of miles an hour around the sun. It takes a full year to make its circumference. Are we aware of any of that motion? No, of course we're not. And if you think you are, you've probably been drinking. But That's the great thing about us and the world, is that we are totally unaware. It's kind of like the world is the center of our universe, and that's how parenting works in Maya. Let me get out my whiteboard and find a blank spot somewhere floating out here in space. So here's the world, and here's some continents that look really awful, but just so you know that it's not, I don't know what that is. Anyway, and here's you standing on the world, and while the world is spinning and flying through space, you just go right along with it. And that's just like parenting. In Maya, you will have a parent object, and you'll have children objects. And the children will always come along with the parent wherever it goes. So let's talk about how to set that up and how it works in Maya. So I'm going to take this cone, hold down Shift, and select my sphere, and hit the P key. That's for parenting, just a regular P. So now check it out. If I select the world and I move it, NATO comes right along for the ride. However, if I select NATO and move that object around, the planet does not come along because it's a one-way connection. Wherever the parent goes, the children come along. But wherever the children go, the parent doesn't necessarily follow. Now I'll give you another kind of interesting little tidbit of information about parent and child relationships. Take a look at the transformations, the information that positions this cone in the world. Currently, it says that translate Y is only at 5 and translate Z is only at 8, but we're really far from the grid. That's because when an object is parented to another object in Maya, its transformations are all suddenly relative to its parent. So watch this. If I show wireframe and I take all of the translates for this cone and set them to 0, where do you think the cone's going to go? Somebody in BuzzNet tell me. Whoever tells me the right answer gets a cookie. They're virtual cookies, but you can have one anyway. Come on, I need some interaction. Wake up, everybody. Somebody tell me where this cone's going to go. The center of. Well, that's close. Inside the sphere. Okay, I think everybody's pretty much got it. Watch this. If I set this to 0, he jumps right to the center of the world. And that's because all of his transformations are relative to his parent. That's how this works. And anything I do, if I rotate this sphere, the child object just comes right along for the ride. Very useful feature for animation, and we'll be making use of this later today. Now, of course, you can have multi-level hierarchies. It's very easy to do. If I select my cone, and we go to modify, make live again, and let's do pyramids this time. And I'll just hit Y and frame up. So hit Y. No, that's too big. So Y. And Y. And Y. And there you go. So now we'll deselect everything, go to Modify, and choose Make Not Live. And there you go. We now have a cone with spikes. But right now, those spikes are just objects in space. So as I move, they'll get left behind. And I don't want that. So what I'll do is I'll select each one of those spikes. And a fast way to do that would just be to marquee select everybody and then deselect the cone. So there's all my spikes. I'll select the cone and hit P. And now all of those spikes are children of the cone itself. So now as I move the cone, all the children come along. As I move the world, everybody comes along. So, does this make sense to everybody? Are there any questions? And you are allowed to respond to me over in BuzzNet, if you want to. Can you animate parenting relationships? Yes, you can. If I understand the way you mean it. I mean, I can, of course, animate all of the objects involved in a parenting relationship, but do you mean change who is the parent at any given time via animation? Yes, of course you can. That is going to be handled by way of constraints. There is a parent constraint whose sole job is to do exactly what you suggest. Now, we won't be going into all of that today, but yes, that does exist. I will confess, it is not quite as intuitive as the same constraint over inside of 3ds Max. Max's system for handling that has always been amazing, and this one's maybe not quite as good, but it's still really nice. Okay, and sorry, I do like making comparisons from time to time. All right, now I want to show you a couple of other things before we get away from parenting. If we go back under the scene hierarchy, so go under Window, Hypergraph, and show the hierarchy one more time. Check it out. We have the world, and NATO's a child, and then attached to NATO are all of those pyramids. So you can actually visualize this hierarchy. This is one way to visualize hierarchies in Maya. Another way is by way of the outliner. So if we go under Window, just jump down to the outliner. This shows you all of the objects in your scene. And you see we have the world. If we expand that, we see NATO. If we expand that, we see all of his children. Just a quick rundown of another piece of the user interface. Okay, so we're done with this. Let's go ahead and delete. Now, as I mentioned earlier, all of these objects are parented to a master node, and we can get to that. We can walk up and down these parenting hierarchies by selecting any one of the children and tapping the up arrow key, and that will automatically select the parent. Remember that because we are going to make use of that. Now, Chris just asked, so separate just separates the object, but still in a group. Yes, indeed. In the case of text, it is all grouped together, so they all end up being parented underneath this master node, and we don't really want that. So what I'm going to do is go back under the hypergraph scene hierarchy, and I'm just going to middle mouse drag each one of these guys out into space. Consequently, if you wanted to, if I undid all that, you can also just select objects and hit Shift P, and that's the same as unparenting. You can select everybody and hit Shift P, and do it all at once like that too. There's a whole bunch of ways to do everything inside of Maya. Funny little side note for doing this though. This leaves us with a node that is currently not doing anything. This polysurface 1 node, check it out. It has nothing attached to it. It's just an empty transform node. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. Now, with that done, it would probably be wise for me to rename all of these letters. So polysurface 2 should probably just be, let's do letter underscore A. I don't want to just name it A. And this will be letter underscore B. And if you want to just be slick and start using other pieces of the interface, remember these entry fields we had up here in the status line? There is a renamer up here. So you can select this guy, and now you can enter names up here if you want to. So this would be letter, and I think I'm hitting buttons on my tablet. Sorry about that. So let's do letter underscore, and I'll select all of this and copy it to the clipboard with Control C. And this will be C, enter. I'll select this guy, select everybody, and just hit paste. Letter D, enter. Paste, letter E, and paste, letter F. So, Zach, that capitalization thing you did in Maya Fundamentals, like letter C, that still works in Maya 2013. Nothing about capitalization has changed in Maya. It's all, that's called camel casing, and that's that is a convention which you are welcome to use or not use. Okay, so now that we've talked about parenting and had that nice little segue, let's go ahead and reattach the rest of our letters to our box. I'll show you a really cool way to do that I tried to do a second ago. Let's go ahead and select our letter C and go to Modify and choose the Snap Together tool. We'll click on the back of the C and click on this little spot of our box, and you see this little curve attached to them. Press Enter, and he just gets attached right up. If he has any weird rotations, just fix them. So in this case, we can see that he was rotated by 180 degrees. We'll just set that back over to 0. In fact, it looks like we need to flip him around, maybe. So we'll set this to 180, set this to 0, and there you go. So there's C, and we could maybe get away with scaling that up just a little bit so it takes up a little bit more of the space. Let's go ahead and take D, and we'll rotate this. I'm just going to go ahead and get the rest of these set up, and you're welcome to do the same, encouraged to do the same. I'll go ahead and scale this down so he fits a little bit inside the panel. Everybody wants to see me do that again, or somebody wants to see me do that again. Let's go ahead and just select an object, go under Modify, Snap Together, click on the back of the E and the top of the box, and press Enter. And it just pops that right down onto the box. We'll just sink it down into the surface and everybody's happy. And one more time, Modify, Snap Together. Grab the back of the F, bottom of the box, press Enter, and just pops it right down there. Looks like we need to scale that down a little bit, center it up, and sink it down into the surface. And there we go. Now, I'm going to ask a question. Did everybody understand what we were talking about with parenting just a moment ago? Just a yes or no over in BuzzNet will be very helpful. Okay. Good. So now we're going to move over to grouping. Grouping is the same thing as parenting. It just creates a group node for you, and it parents everything to that group node. It's no different. So watch this. I'm going to verify that everything is kind of sunk down into the surface and that I like the placement of everything, though of course I could change it later. I just like doing this. And I'm going to scale up my E a little bit so it fills up the square just a little bit more nicely. We do the same thing with A. It's a little puny. Perfect. Now, I'm going to grab everybody. So all of the letters, the block, and we'll go to Edit and choose Group. Or you can just hit Control-G, but I want you to go to Group and open up its options box. Make sure the group pivot is set to the center. And then click Group. And now you have a singular object. It's like a little letter block. But it's not really one object. If we go back over to the hierarchy, like we were looking at previously, notice we now have Group 1, which contains P cube 1, and then all of our letters. We should probably rename some of those too. So P cube 1, let's call this letter block. Actually, we'll stick with our convention. So letter block base. And then under our group, we'll do letter block, and I like doing something like GRP at the end so I know it's a group. Now, there's a trick, something to be aware of here. If we select any one of these objects, this does not select the group. In fact, in this case, all the letters got left behind. So you need to either tap the up arrow key to select that group and move the whole block around, or remember earlier on when we were talking about the status line, I told you that we wouldn't get a chance to use this right away. We have Select by Hierarchy. So the leftmost button over here, if we click this, now when we click, we get the highest level of the hierarchy, so we quickly select that block, which is very, very handy. So let's go back over to our hierarchy for just one moment and hit Control-Shift-H to show our floor. So we have our floor, we have our block, and we're about 58 minutes in, so I'd like to go ahead and take another break for everybody to kind of stand up and stretch and catch up if you need to. I'm going to go ahead and reset ready statuses. If you're following along and you'd like to let me know that you're up to this point, please do so. You'll have 10 minutes to get caught up to this point. If you have any questions in the meantime, just throw them in, and I will get to them when we reconvene from break. So let's go ahead and do that now.